Spørsmålene rundt Liverpool mange, men finnes det noen svar? Vi hører med mannen som vet mer enn de fleste.
I've drummed it into our players that they are privileged to play for you.
Velkommen til en fersk episode av Pausepraten. Mitt navn Jens Bessesen, og i dag det en liten spesialepisode hvor vi har fått besøk av David Lynch, en av de journalistene som følger klubben tettest. Han her for å svare på de mange spørsmålene som har kommet inn fra dere som ser eller lytter på. Det veldig gøy at så mange har meldt seg på med spørsmål, og derfor har vi sett oss nødt til å dele episoden i 2, sånn at Lynch kan komme gjennom det meste, så dette da del 1 av Q&A med David Lynch. David, I think you're going to be our therapist for the day because we received loads and loads of questions from readers who are wondering what's going on in Liverpool 2 weeks before the new season starts. I'll just jump straight in with my only question for the day. It's the latest news, Ibrahim Mbaye. From PSG. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so definite interest on Liverpool's part. They are kind of stressing at the moment that nothing's particularly advanced, or certainly that was the case around 24 hours ago. You know, what they will admit at the moment, he's kind of one of a number of options that they're looking at in terms of potential wingers. I wouldn't say they're kind of quite hard in negotiations right now, but of course, I think they've got, you know, like I say, genuine interest in the player, and it's just a case of whether they decide to proceed with that or not. But I think there's been, you know, talks on the player's side and a bit of buy-in on his part in terms of a willingness to come to Liverpool. But it's just all about striking the deal with PSG. And as I say, as I understand it, not quite sure he's kind of nailed on as number one on the list at the moment. He may end up being eventually. But we're just at an early stage where they will admit their interest, but we're not in advance. So let's see where they go with it, really, is kind of the message at the moment.
And his teammate, Bradley Barcola, is the main target for the summer. Tore wants to know what's the latest news in the chase for him.
Yeah, so that one a lot further along the line in terms of, because Liverpool are in talks directly with PSG about the players. So, you know, they're trying to kind of work together to get near a fee that both find acceptable. At the moment, a little bit of deadlock because PSG are saying they want kind of something closer to around 150 million euros. Liverpool not quite willing to get to that amount. I think they want to pay something around 120 million euros. So fairly big gap in valuation. But of course, you know, Liverpool know the game here and how this negotiation has to go, which is basically that, you know, PSG are adding attackers to their lineup, so they're eventually going to put themselves in a position where they kind of have to sell. He's got 2 years on his contract remaining, not really intending to sign a new one, would prefer to go out and seek a fresh challenge. So the conditions are all there for a sale, really, and the player is bought into Liverpool as well. He is keen on the move, so all the ingredients are there, really. It's just a little bit of a game of chicken now. PSG trying to work out how much they can get for him. Liverpool trying to pay as little as possible to get it over the line. But it's one that I feel fairly confident about a compromise being reached because, as I say, all those ingredients are there. So it might just be one, you know, like I say, playing a bit of chicken towards the end of the window. That might sort of drag it out a little bit. But the talks are ongoing, and I think there's a kind of willingness on all sides to eventually get it done. I just can't make any promises over the timing.
And then Nikolai wants to know if you think he's going to be a success if he signs.
I think he's got a lot of the tools that will work in the Premier League. I mean, you know, you question it in terms of, okay, well, PSG are willing to sell because he's probably their fourth best attacker. He's been nudged out of that slightly by Doué, Dembele and Kvaratskhelia. But then you probably got to tell yourself as well that, well, look, that's possibly the best attack in the world. So to be the fourth best in that, there's no real shame in that. And I think he's got, like I say, a lot of tools that would work in the Premier League. I mean, electric pace, which is something Liverpool lacked massively for me last season. It's probably number one priority to address in this window because teams found it so easy to defend against Salah and Gakpo last season. You know, they didn't feel there was threat in behind them. They were never penned in any way. And I think Barcola will go a long way to kind of alleviating that. He has got that electric pace that will help you. He's got one-on-one skills, which again, I think Liverpool lacked at times. And yeah, he's got the quality and the pedigree. And I look at the wing market this summer, and I thought, for me, Diomande was probably, they were right to go for him initially. I think he should have been number one target. Unfortunately, missed out, but that happens. I will, not criticise Liverpool in any way for trying, because I think with his profile, his age, and everything, you had to give it a go. But if you're looking for the next best winger on the market, then and it's not, there's not a million miles between the two. By the way, it's just that Diomande is only 19, and so you think, wow. But of course, Barcola is still only 23 himself, and there is still some development potentially there. So yeah, he's not a bad second choice at all. And I think there'll be a lot of Premier League sides would have been keen on signing Barcola if they could, but he's bought into the idea of Liverpool. So I think it will be a smart signing. I think he'll suit the Premier League down to the ground as well. So yeah, fingers crossed he can get it over the line. And like I say, I think the signs are positive on that front.
And Iraola has spoken as well. He wants wingers who can play on both sides. Do you think he could be effective on the right side as well?
Yeah, I think we'll see a bit of that in terms of Iraola, rotating his wingers during games, generally in his starting 11s as well. But I would imagine if Barcola comes in, it will be primarily to play the left-hand side. When you spend those sorts of sums and whatever it ends up being, it's going to be a lot of money. You don't tend to start moving that player around then. I think they do see him primarily as a left-sider. And of course, there's potentially some space opening up in the squad on that side. It is very heavy at the moment, but there is potentially some space opening up on that side, which maybe will be the topic of one of the questions. So I don't want to kind of put spoilers in, but yeah, I think we'll primarily see him on the left-hand side if he does sign, but he is capable of playing on the right, and no doubt we'll see him sometimes there as well.
And Erling wants to know if there are any other candidates if the Barcola deal should fall through.
Yeah, well, Liverpool are kind of happy to throw out the usual names of kind of Minter, Fernandes, Pardo, and El Mala as well as potential alternatives. I have to say I'm a little bit sceptical on some of those, whether Liverpool would consider them Liverpool quality. And I think it's telling that we know about those names, and then Mbaye comes out of absolutely nowhere, and he hadn't been mentioned previously. We know how Liverpool work. I think they're just the names that they're happy for us to know. So, the reality is there will be others out there that we've not considered that will potentially be on that list. But like I think with Barcola, I'm not at the kind of at the point where I'm considering about alternatives they'll go for. I think there is a determination to get it over the line, and as I say, PSG kind of not happy to sell but willing to sell. They can realize that they can get a decent amount of money for him as well, for a player who isn't in their first choice front three, and the player likes the idea of trying the Premier League and with Liverpool specifically. So I'm not at the point where I'm thinking about the alternatives yet. I feel a certain confidence they'll get him over the line. You can never guarantee anything until a deal is done, but it feels like the direction of travel at the moment.
And if you watched Norway during the World Cup this summer, you noticed a couple of good left wingers in Antonio Nusa and Andreas Schjelderup. Eva wants to know if we sign another winger after Barcola, could it be one of them?
Yeah, I think Nusa in particular is one that I've kind of known they've kept an eye on for a few years, but not sure if he's kind of, he's a big talent, don't get me wrong, but not sure he's maybe considered Liverpool level at the moment. I mean, they watched an awful lot of Leipzig and, of course, really settled on the fact that Diomande was the one that they wanted. Not sure with Nusa, particularly, they're tripping over themselves to maybe sign him. And Sheldrup, again, one that maybe is on the radar, but again, when you speak, you can say quite confidently both of these players will have been scouted because of the age range, where they play, who they play for, how they play, because the numbers are decent for both. But, Liverpool are looking for kind of someone in that Mbaye range, I think, who is really quite young and got potential to be what they think is a superstar, or someone who at the moment is in that Barcola range, who is already kind of established and maybe in the right team you can make the most of him. So I wouldn't say either of those are kind of the stars of the team to the point that they would maybe point themselves out as Liverpool players at the moment for me. So I'd be kind of surprised if they were either of the two that they pivot to. But as I say, I'd be surprised if they pivot at all really away from Barcola. I think that deal will get done.
Yeah. I'm just going to mention a couple of other Norwegians as well, because I think Liverpool fans want to see their national team heroes playing for us this season. So Paul is mentioning Christopher Ayer from Brentford, because he had a good World Cup and could be maybe a cheaper option at centre back and right back.
Whether he's a Liverpool right back just because of his stature, I kind of, he doesn't strike me as someone who Liverpool would want to play in that position. Maybe a kind of cheap option at centre half, but as I understand it, the plan around that is they would prefer someone who is genuinely versatile, and I know he is versatile, but again, I don't really want to see Ayer playing right back for Liverpool. I don't really think that's a good fit for how Liverpool look to play personally. So he would be one that would kind of surprise me. I think if you were just looking for someone to fill in cheap at centre half, then maybe, but he's not a name I've ever heard, and for that reason, really, as I say, in terms of he is technically versatile, but probably not in the way Liverpool would like.
And maybe one for right back they may have looked at, although he's turning 29 in November. Julian Ryerson also has had a great season with Dortmund. Could you see him becoming an option?
Yeah, so again, not a name that I've heard on the radar at all. I think a lot, if it was a 29-year-old, a lot would depend on kind of contract situation, how keen the player is himself to kind of come for what would essentially be a backup role as well, in the long term anyway. So it's not one that's on my radar, so I'd be surprised. To be honest, I quite liked the breakout star for Norway, the striker Haaland. I don't know if you've heard of him. He looks quite a good player, so if Liverpool could get him, that would be an interesting one for me. But yeah, outside of that, I would love to see another Norwegian come into the Liverpool team, but I just haven't heard any like genuine links that makes me think there's anything in that at the moment. So yeah, I don't know, unless there's any other kids coming through that might come onto the radar in the next couple of years, but I haven't heard any for this window.
No, and normally we don't get these questions, but I guess it's still fresh how well they did at the World Cup, so that may explain it. But at least we have spoken about the defense now. Ronny and Henrik are among many fans who are worried about how the defense is looking with injuries, and only Van Dijk fit at centre back, and only Frimpong and Calvin Ramsey at right back. And Sky Sports reported earlier this week that the plan is not to buy anyone, but you said yesterday on your YouTube channel that it might happen later in the window. Do you know what the plan is?
Yeah, so I had a conversation a couple of days ago that kind of, to summarize it really, was the idea that, this from someone who's kind of would know at Liverpool really, is to say, they would never go as hard as to say we're not going to sign a defender. I think ruling it out at this stage internally they consider would be foolish. There's no point in doing that. What they would say is at the moment, every kind of focus is on getting the attack sorted. They feel like they need two more forwards. That could be Barcola and Mbaye. I lean towards Barcola getting done, but Barcola and another, because there's potential exits there as well. But all the focus is on that at the moment. But then, looking at the wage bill, looking at kind of what's left in terms of transfer funds, there's potential for them to add a defender towards the end of the window, and that would be someone I wouldn't expect. I would be surprised if it was a centre half and a right back, which I know some people are kind of keen on. I wouldn't be against it myself, but I wouldn't expect that. The talk is for, if they are to have one, it will be later in the window because it's low priority at the moment, and it would be someone who's versatile as well. So one way you've got to kind of hang on to see how that plays out. But as I say, I would not go as far as to rule it out as I know Sky did in their reporting. That's not why I'm here at the moment. It is a possibility. It's just maybe not a possibility in the next week or so. So maybe we'll start to hear names towards the end of the window, and I really hope they sign someone because I think they are massively short there. I think Areola said himself that they're massively short there. So I would like to see that, but I don't think it's going to happen soon. I think it'll be later in the window if it does happen. And as I say, maybe one versatile defender.
Do you agree with that strategy of waiting when even the manager has said that he needs more players?
I think you've got to kind of, there's only so much we know at times. I don't agree with the strategy in terms of, I would love them to sign someone who could start in the back four, be that at right back or centre half on the first day of the season at Newcastle. My view with what I know at the moment is that I would love to see that happen. I think a lot would agree with that. But of course, we don't know. Do Liverpool know exactly how much they're going to have left in the kitty after the Barcola deal goes through? Do they know how much the second forward that they want to sign will come in? But do they know what's going to happen with Curtis Jones if they need to replace him? And again, what funds that takes up, what the wage bill looks like. I think these are all these things they've got to consider. And I think Liverpool's maths here is basically scoring goals and being good going forward can cover up a lot of sins at the back. And we've seen that many times to Liverpool sides. Of course, yes, we all want them to be perfectly balanced, but in the situation they find themselves in, they think that getting the attack absolutely right is the main priority right now. And I probably do agree with that because I do think goals cover a multitude of sins. So I get where they're kind of thinking about that. But of course, my dream situation, I think everyone would agree, would be that they do sign a defender towards the end, because I just do think it's too weak there. I think there are too many question marks. I think Joe Gomez has to be discounted almost from the squad in people's thinking, because he's just so unreliable physically, which is a shame, because he's a great lad and a great player, but it's the truth. Such inexperience alongside Virgil, and of course Virgil another year older as well, so to ask him to keep going to the well is not fair, I would say. So I think they need a defender, and I think they need a defender, if you get that versatile player who's right back centre half, the argument they'll say is, we don't need to sign one because we've got players back in the next few weeks. That's true, but you probably need to get on with replacing Joe Gomez in the long term anyway. Why not just do that this summer and give yourself a little bit more depth at the back? So I hope they do that. And I can see why they're not signing two. I can see why they would look for that versatile option, but I think they have to do it. That's my opinion. Whether they'll agree come the end of the window, and I'm sure they'll have the reasons if they don't. We'll have to see, but I would love to see that, because it's the one area of the squad. I think they'll sort the attack. It's the one area the squad have got real concerns about going into the new season.
René is saying don't make the Mark Gay mistake again. He also mentions the right back of Strasbourg, Guela Doué, or Arnau Martinez from Girona. But do you think that we're still kind of hurting from that Gay mistake of last year, that it didn't come?
I don't know with that one. I mean, I still don't think if you'd have added Gay to the squad last season that Liverpool would have played much better at all. I think the problems were too deep. I think, I thought that there were issues that the manager created. I think there were issues in the squad that were baked in the moment that the window shut. And I don't think Gay was like number one of those. And the fact is, in the long term, will Liverpool point out that Xhaka, if he fulfills his potential, will prove to be a better, have a better ceiling maybe than Mark Gay, and of course not be on 300 grand a week, which he is on at the moment. So, I think you can justify that one. And I really don't believe it would have completely altered the path of Liverpool's season personally. But yeah, what I want to see is kind of just not leaving a gaping hole in the squad. And I just think it is such a hole because, you've got to give Xhaka a bit of time. Obviously, we're probably about a month or so away from seeing Leone. Joe Gomez probably back in September as well. It just looks very fragile at the moment. And I guess, for them to make a good start, I think there's a big challenge to be had there. And I just love them to have another solution. And as I say, I think it's a long-term solution as well, because I think you need to replace Joe Gomez in the long term. So I would love to see it, and I agree it would be a mistake if they don't. But at the moment it is very much a wait and see, as I understand it. That's the talk from in Liverpool, because they are just looking at that attack.
And who do you think will start alongside Van Dijk in the season opener?
100% Xhaka. He's got the, I think he'll be back for that. They've been careful with him, but the expectation is, or the hope certainly is, that he'll be back. He's took the number 5 shirt. I know he is very young, but of course, I don't think he's coming in as a young player. I think he's seen as, he's a year younger than Kanate was when Kanate came into the squad, and he started an awful lot of games in his first season. So I think they think that Xhaka is capable of that, albeit maybe they don't want to be starting him for 50 games. But yeah, he's seen as someone who's definitely capable. So I think it will be him alongside it. What they do at right back is, are they going to have to fudge it with a midfielder? I'm not sure, but I think Xhaka will be the starting centre half at the start of the season. And just on a couple of names you mentioned, Guella Doué, not anything I've heard about. I think I get the feeling at the moment that's one that's being driven by supporters who like the idea of him and think he'd be a good fit, and therefore his name's being pushed. But I haven't seen or heard anything that kind of makes me think there's anything concrete right now in that. And Arnau Martinez, I know they won't sign. That got shot down to me a couple of weeks ago fairly firmly, to be honest. It's not someone that they're interested in.
Even though it's cheap, but maybe there's a reason for
but
that.
I think he's just a right back, right? I don't know the player that well, but I think he's just a right back, which is, as I say, they think they're not necessarily looking to sign someone who can just play that position.
It's not easy finding those who can play both, though, at this time. Esri Konsa as well got mentioned, but maybe that was a long shot as well.
Yeah, so I saw Ben Jacobs had said about kind of, someone they'd inquired about, and I've had someone banging on at me on my DMs on X for a few weeks about, Liverpool are interested, but I find that one hard to see because the price that's getting mentioned is kind of 50, 60 million, even if you knock them down to 45 or whatever, for a 29-year-old, is he, who you can play right back, but he's not great there. I'd say he's more a centre half, is playing every week at Villa at a decent level. It just doesn't seem a very Liverpool deal. He doesn't give you a long-term solution everywhere, in any position, in either of the positions. So I'd be kind of surprised by that, really. That's just my personal view on it, though. Clearly there's been some level of interest there, but it doesn't seem a very Liverpool deal to do. But again, I wouldn't be against it, by the way, because I think, that really would solve a few problems. I think he is capable of having that role in the squad. He's homegrown as well. But I'm not sure Liverpool will agree, to be honest. It just doesn't feel them to spend that kind of sum on age, on the age that he is and kind of the role he would be given in the squad. It's a lot of money, I'd say.
I'm just going to say one more time because it's my personal thing from last year. I was disappointed about Jarell Quansah. Would be perfect as well, even more homegrown, but maybe not happening until the earliest next year. Next summer.
Yeah, I think potential maybe for next year if he continues to kick on. I would say with him, I wouldn't ever want to see him used at right back. I know people talk about it, but you think about the couple of games when he did play there. I think it was one was the League Cup final, wasn't it? And I don't think he played particularly well. The other one was maybe Newcastle away, and he got torn to shreds. So. Not for me, really. And I think, did he play there for England actually against Mexico as well, and got sent off in the end? He'd had a decent game, but he got. I'm not a big fan of his at right back. So for me, he wouldn't solve that problem. I guess it's just a case of kind of whether they think he's a long-term option at centre half. But one thing I would say about Quansah is it's worth remembering is I don't think he wants to come back to play 20 games a season either. He was very, very keen to make the move. That was very much pushed from his side because he wanted to play football and wasn't getting it at Liverpool. So, if he does come back, I think he'll want it to be to have a bigger role than he had at the time. So, if Liverpool can offer him that in a year, maybe. But as things stand, I don't think they could.
And just a mention of another former player who left last year. Kasper and Thomas wants to know if there's any chance of Trent making a return from Real Madrid. They seem to have forgiven him, maybe.
Yeah, I'd be very, very surprised by that, to be honest. I think he didn't have a great first season at Real Madrid, but I don't think there's any appetite there to move him on. I think Dumfries has been signed as a backup to Trent, that more experienced option to be behind him. And everyone kind of hoping he'll have a better season. I think from Liverpool's perspective, you'd have to pay a lot of money for someone they only got 10 million for. And I think as well, this is just my view as well. I do wonder with Trent if in the end it's going to kind of look like Liverpool. It'll look like a good decision that they didn't give him the contract because he's played an awful lot of football at high intensity since the age of kind of 17, 18. and he's starting to get regular muscle injuries now. It would not surprise me now if we were kind of post-peak for Trent. I know he's not massively reliant on pace in the way that some players are, but once you start to pick up those muscle injuries a lot, and you can't really avoid running at fullback, even if you don't want to, and sometimes he doesn't want to. I just wonder if there's going to be a lot of injuries for him in his future, and whether you'll start to see a bit of a decline in him. But that's just my view. It could be one that Liverpool think, well, it was a shame to lose him, but if we'd have signed him up for another 5 years on the wages he would have wanted, it probably wouldn't have worked out that well for them. So, just one I think worth keeping an eye on, really.
Mm. And but the last transfer in for Liverpool was Victor Munoz at the end of June. Nothing has happened since. Juha wants to know why is it going so slowly?
I think if you look around it, and this is the problem, is sometimes we're so focused. I do this myself all the time because I only cover Liverpool. We're so focused on them. It's like there's not many other clubs have done a load of business. If you look around the Premier League at the moment, I think the World Cup has really put the brakes on a lot of stuff. So a lot of clubs haven't been majorly busy. So I think it's kind of, I think that's across the market generally. And, you need that domino effect sometimes of kind of like, maybe Bruno goes to Arsenal now, and that's one of the big deals that's finally getting over the line, and then that creates Norgard to Everton, and maybe that frees up James Garner to go somewhere, and and kind of this domino effect, as I say. So I think all of it's been kind of got a bit sticky really because of the World Cup, but we're probably going to see a lot of movement now in this kind of last month of the window. So I think Liverpool are no different to everybody else in terms of that. Barcola, they're moving forward, and Mbaye, we're now learning about the interest because that's kind of starting to advance. So, there's potential for Liverpool to have a busy end to the window. And I think they're no different to a few other clubs in terms of that, or most of the Premier League clubs really.
Mm. And of course, one signing who has had a good summer is Ndukwe, the centre back, but he can't play this season because he doesn't have a work permit. And Sven is wondering if Mortala Ndiaye is being viewed as a more talented player because he got registered as the elite significant contribution player. That was only one spot, and it didn't go to Ndukwe. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I wonder whether part of the reason for that was because they've had a look at Mbaye a bit closer. They've been able to because, of course, he's been in the club since January, so he was kind of a safer bet for that. Of course, if you just judge on pre-season, you're probably saying Ndukwe, was probably a little bit ahead of him. I thought both of them played well, by the way, but Ndukwe was maybe a little bit ahead of it. So maybe there's a bit of regret there because they've not been able to see the player as close up as they had with Mbaye. But there's excitement about Mbaye, by the way. He was one I wrote a piece picking him out as kind of one to watch ahead of pre-season because I spoke to someone who kind of is in and around the academy, and they said like they absolutely love this kid. He's got so much kind of so many of the tools you need really in terms of his ability to pass the ball, which I think we saw. He's a real ambition in the way he passes. He doesn't always pull it off, but he tries and he thumps it through the lines. Loves defending. Really good build on him as well. He's got the pace. So all the things that he needs really, and they really like him at Liverpool. So yeah, it's a shame that you can't register both and be able to give them kind of League Cup minutes and whatnot. So that is a shame. And with Ndukwe in particular, they got to go out on that loan. But I don't think that will do him any harm either. Go and make some mistakes somewhere. Play some regular minutes in kind of a top 5 league. My view is that the Bundesliga would be perfect for him. I know his agents at the moment are kind of weighing up a number of options. They've got a few clubs on the table, and they're just kind of working through those right now to see where he lands. But I think that can be good for him, as I say. And the fact is, with both of those, Liverpool captured a couple of massive talents there. And I think the future is very bright at centre half. And they have to do more of this, by the way, in terms of post-Brexit. Getting ahead of it, being able to make sure we get them signed when they're 18. Of course, with the way that the market is inflated as well, maybe signing these players now, not when they're 21 and they're starting to really break through at a big club and the money's going up and up. So they've got to kind of be a bit clever with that now. So I think these are two really, really good examples of the kind of youth recruitment policy, but also the policy that will serve the first team when the figures around first team players now are just through the roof.
One player who is getting linked away from the club is Cody Gakpo, with Tottenham being interested. Sven wants to know if Gakpo is for sale, and was that the reason that he didn't travel to the US with the rest of the squad?
No, I think the reason he didn't travel was more kind of the personal issues that he'd had recently. So I think it was more kind of reflection of that and the kind of uniquely difficult summer that he's had, and giving him a bit of extra rest, because of course that all happened while he was at the World Cup. It was must have been a really, really difficult time for him. So I think it was more a recognition of that. But what I would say with Gakpo, you see conflicting reports about this in terms of he's for sale, he's not for sale. Well, technically both of those are right. So he's not for sale. Liverpool are not kicking him out the door. They're not trying to, hawk him around to anyone that will buy him. But he was described to me, and I said this in a video that I did a couple of months back, as someone who was not untouchable in this market, as someone who could potentially leave the club. So I think we're seeing that come to fruition now. I think, Spurs are really interested. They're willing to pay a lot of money. So he's not for sale up until the point at which Spurs put an incredible amount of money on the table. And the fact is, it looks likely that Spurs will do that now. And so Liverpool, as I say, he's not considered untouchable. He does have a price. Spurs are likely to get near that. So I'd almost now, with Liverpool progressing for other targets as well, would, all the kind of things are lining up for him to leave now. So yeah, I think he's not for sale technically, but there's real potential for him to leave, because I think Spurs' interest is genuine and they're willing to put a big amount of money on the table, and Liverpool in turn are willing and looking to sign two wingers. So, it wouldn't be a surprise if we come to the end of the window. Gakpo's gone, Barcola's in, and another winger who may be in by maybe someone else through the door.
And then Eirik wants to know how much would it take to sell Gakpo, and Dawood asks, why is the price tag so high for him?
Well, 60 to 70 million is the number that was put on it to me. And I think, that is a lot of money, but it tells a story, I think, that Spurs are willing to sell, to go up to that amount, because, why shouldn't he be, really? I think you think what he's done at Liverpool, the amount of goals he's scored, his Premier League experience, he's got, good height on him as well. He's got a good build. He's still only 27. So, in theory, coming into his peak years, I think it's like 30 odd Premier League goals, isn't it? And 100 odd appearances or whatever. Which is not bad for a winger. You don't all have to be Mo Salah, kind of freakish numbers. That for a normal attacking winger is pretty good. And I'd say, you look at some of the valuations on other players. I think 65 to 70 million in this market for a Premier League winning, a Premier League winning winger is an absolute bargain, really. I mean, it's spot on. So, in the age bracket he is, and like I say, with the experience that he's got. So, I think that's absolutely spot on. And I think Liverpool will sell him at that price. But I also think they'll look and reflect on it and say, that's been a great signing for us. We signed him for 30 odd million in that January when we signed him. He scored X amount of goals for us, like 50 odd goals in nearly 200 games, and won us a league title. Played his part in a decent era for us, and then we made a profit on him. I'd say that's really, really smart business from Liverpool, and that's why he's not untouchable at the moment.
And Kjetil wants to know if Liverpool could go for Mickey van der Ven in return, but I think I read today that he might be closing in on a new contract.
Yeah, I saw that about the new contract, but to be honest, I've never been given any indication that Liverpool were that keen on Van der Ven at this point. He was someone they watched when he was at Wolfsburg quite closely, and I think when he was on the cusp of coming to the Premier League, if Liverpool had desperately needed a centre-half at that point, they could have potentially signed him, but it never went any further than that, really. And the links that have been coming up since he's been at Spurs all the time, never been given any encouragement on that. So yeah, not surprised he's signing a new deal. I guess that's why Liverpool's name's been being dropped so regularly, to kind of hurry those negotiations along. But too injury prone and too inconsistent for Liverpool to have ever considered going for him.
Jed Spence was mentioned a lot on Twitter, at least.
Yeah, so I know that's doing the rounds at the moment. I don't know if people are really sold on that idea. I mean, I think a lot of the hype comes from the fact he's had a decent World Cup, and I've actually watched him several times for Spurs and thought this kid is actually quite decent. Like, he's not, it's surprising to me it took him so long to get into the team, as he did really at Tottenham. But of course that was coming. I've spoken to people at Liverpool about this, and they've said no interest really, and it makes sense to me. I look at the way it's being written, the side that the story is coming from. Got a lot of people with links to Spurs telling me Liverpool are keen. I've got a lot of people with links to his agent telling me Liverpool are keen. I think that tells you what the story is there, which is that, as I understand it, as I'm told, Spurs are quite keen to sell, and so they're generating a market, and dropping Liverpool's name in there is quite helpful in terms of that. And of course, from the player's perspective, he would be very keen to move to Liverpool if he potentially could, but I don't think that's going to be on offer for him this summer. As I understand it, there's no interest there, so do not expect Jed Spence to be holding up a shirt anytime soon.
And then to finish off part one of the Q&A, Eva asks, what's the most likely and the least likely transfer this summer?
Yeah, I think the most likely, I would put Barcola in that. I've got some confidence that will get done. It's not going to be an easy one. It's big sums involved, and it might drag on a little bit. But as I said previously, I just think so many of the ingredients are there for that to get done. And least likely, I mean, well, I don't think they'll be signing Lionel Messi this summer.
You mentioned Haaland as well.
yeah, that would be really, really nice. I mean, in terms of some of the links that are out there, like I say, I would knock Spence down. I'd be surprised if anything came of the Konsa interest with the price. Those are ones you can kind of discount, really. Arnel Martinez. There's a few there, really. I'm capable of knocking down and don't seem so likely. Very hard to. It's easier a lot of the time to say who they're not interested in, who's not going to sign, but finding out who exactly they are going to sign is generally the difficult part of the job most of the time.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much for the part one, and we'll be back very soon with part two, where we're going to look a bit more at the squad and the club in general.